Hi there, I'm Mike Hebert. Thank you for joining me today for this broadcast. I'm here today with Dennis Pine. He's a candidate for Windsor 232, which is in Springfield. I serve in the legislature presently as a representative. I represent Wyndham 1, which is Guilford and Vernon, down the southeastern corner of the state. And as I said, I'm here with Dennis Pine, and we're just going to have a little conversation here. I want to get to know Dennis a little better. I've met him a couple of times, and I'd like you to get to know Dennis a little better. So here we go. Dennis, can you tell the viewers a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, went to school, family, whatever you think people should know about you?
Okay. First, I was born and raised in Rochester, New Hampshire, and I graduated from Spalding High School in Rochester in 1964, so I'm kind of old. But right after graduation, I went into the Navy, and I stayed in the Navy for 7 years, and I saw a lot of the world. And at that time, I got a great education to realize what the rest of the world was like and how much I appreciated the United States. And to this day, I still have that feeling. I like our democracy. I do not like socialism, and I like to keep it that way. I moved to Springfield, Vermont in 1974. At that time, I met a local girl, Barbie, and got married. Had 2 daughters, if I got to say their name, Denise and Elizabeth, and started working in Vermont as an apprentice plumber. And I went through the state's apprenticeship program for 5 years, became a master plumber in the state of Vermont. And I also joined the Vermont National Guard, Army National Guard, to try to fulfill more of my military obligation to my country. And I was part of the 131st Engineers. If people can remember, back 25 years ago, it was the 131st that got activated and went over to Desert Storm. And I learned another lesson. I learned what it was like living in the desert. I am now a retired plumber, and I'm a retired military man, living life of luxury. But what I wanted to say too, basically, that I am retired, because people were wondering, why or how can I do this, run for representative, and I said it's probably because I am retired. There was times that you thought of doing it as when I was working as a plumber, but there's no way I could commit that time. And now that I can commit that time, I thought I'd give it a shot.
Well, a couple of things. First, I'd like to thank you for your military service in the Guard and stuff. As a fellow veteran,
Say hi to all the guys.
I appreciate your service. And I also appreciate that you're willing to put yourself out there again and serve your state again and serve your community again by running for the state legislature. People don't realize how much that takes or how much it involves, and it can be a lot of work, and it's not something that people undertake lightly. So, having said that, what made Dennis Pine decide to be a legislator at this time? What made you decide this is the year I've got to run?
Okay, I don't know if this is going to sound good or not, but it was a little while ago. I was listening to the news, and President Obama notified all the states that they got to change the bathroom makeup in their school system to transgender, and then make it available that if a guy feels like a girl, he can go in the girls' room or the girls' locker room, and vice versa. And if the state didn't do this, then they were going to lose federal aid. And I go, what? I just couldn't believe that was, put in front of me. And me with 2 daughters. Now they're old now, but if I had younger daughters, and the President of the United States came up to me and told me that a man could go into their locker room, that would upset me. And I was upset. And a little while later, after that, I heard that there was 11 states that actually said to the president, we're not going to do that. We're going to forfeit our federal aid, and you can stop bullying us. And I realized that Vermont was not one of those states. And I began to think that, okay, the people in Montpelier don't care. They don't care about my daughters being in school. And that, if you want offensive, that offended me. And so basically, without thinking, I went down to the city clerk. I told her, I said, put me on the ballot. She said, what party? And I said, well, put me on the Republican. I favor more Republicans. And she did. And then I went home and said, you know, what did I do? But I won the primary. There was no contest. And here I am.
Okay, so then there you go. You show up at town clerk and you decide to register, and you didn't know which party. So sounds to me like you were probably a pretty independent guy by nature.
Oh, I was, because there was times that the Republicans upset me, and you know, so I never voted Democrat, but my core is Republican. But sometimes it did upset me, and I said, okay, I'm kind of independent. I could, you know, probably go either way. But
All right, so then is it safe to assume that when you get to Montpelier, you'd be more inclined to vote for the folks back home than a party?
yes,
All right.
but you're going to
All right.
find out I'm a little bit Republican as we go along here.
Well, that's okay. That's okay. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Now, you've told me basically what triggered you, that straw that broke that camel's back that's going to get you up there. When you get elected on November 8th, you know, you're going to be home waiting, and you're going to find out, okay, now you're a rep. What are you going to do? So, just knowing that, what do you see as your first three priorities when you get up there? What are
Yeah.
your top things you'd like to talk about?
Okay, first and foremost, I want everybody to understand I'm pro-life. I believe life has value from conception till natural death. I can't waver from this. Somebody told me a little while ago, you know, when I was going around and saying, you know, asked me, oh, are you pro-lifer? I said, yes, I am pro-life. And they said, good. And I go, okay, you know, it's just an opinion. But they said something that kind of affected me. He said, it seemed to him that if a person couldn't value the life of the unborn or the elderly, the terminal sick, ill people, if they couldn't value their lives, then when is it going to come time that they're not going to value my life? And I said, wow, you know, that's probably close. And because I noticed that the people that don't value the life over in some European countries, they're actually euthanizing babies that are already born. I says, it's probably right around the corner that's going to happen to this country. And I said, okay, there's a time that you got to stop. And so that's why I'm pro-life. I picked a side. I know there's the other side. The other thing, next thing I'm thinking is government overreach. I think the government are trying to control our lives a little bit too much. And as we talk a little bit further, and some of that's in our educational system. I think they're changing our educational system way too much. They're teaching a new form of history, math, sciences. I mean, it's all changed from when we were going to school. I think that's going in the wrong direction. But they're also trying to control our lives on what we can and can't do. You know, like the federal government is coming in, they're saying, okay, no more weapons, no more of this, no more of that. Some people, you can't drink sodas anymore. I said, it's really getting out of hand. I think the government should sit back, do what they're supposed to be doing, and just letting the lives of the people on their own. The next thing is, I think it's uncontrolled spending. And I'm saying spending instead of taxes, because I think they go one and one. But why do we have taxes? It's because we spend money. So I think if we control our spending, we can control our taxes. It was a little while ago, I got a form from an organization out there saying, sign this form against taxes. Promise that you won't vote for a tax. And I thought to myself, I says, okay, that can be easily done. But if I vote for a spending bill, the only way they're going to pay for that spending is to increase the taxes. So how can I vote that I'm not going to vote for a tax if my constituents want me to vote for the spending? So I refuse to sign the paper. I like to be able to say, I know there's got to be some spending, but it's got to be controlled. I think they're going way over the top. And one of the things that I just found out was that Sue Minter is running for the governorship. Mm-hmm. And she's thinking of coming in with a service tax. And I'm going, what? We're being taxed for everything we do. Now you're going to tax us for the service that we receive. It's getting to the point, and I really haven't figured this out, but I think it's getting to a point where we are working more and more to pay taxes than we are to support the family. Those are the three things: pro-life, government overreach, and uncontrolled spending.
All right, well, certainly on the spending issue, if you look at the course we've been on for the last few years, it's not sustainable. We keep increasing spending 4, 5, 6%, and yet our revenues are kind of stagnant at 2%. So each year we have to do a budget adjustment, and there's always more and more taxes. Mm-hmm. And over the last several years, it's been hundreds of millions of dollars in new taxes and fees. So I think you're spot on with the thought of how we balance one with the other. Now you mentioned Sue Mentner, and a difference between her and Phil Scott is that Sue Mentner is supportive of the carbon tax as well as the state sales tax and services that you were talking about. In Springfield, you look around Springfield, you look at the businesses, you see what's left there. Over the years, the tools industry has left. I mean, a lot of things have left Springfield. How do you see the carbon tax benefiting Springfield, or what do you think it would do to Springfield?
I'm glad you brought that up, Mike, because I did want to mention that. The carbon tax. What I think I found out was that the carbon tax is a theory. Let's tax the heck out of a population against, for fossil fuels. The people will get so they're going to stop using the fossil fuels and go into green energy. And they say we're going to tax them high so that they're not going to like these fossil fuels. Then they're going to get rid of the fossil fuels and get green energy. Good. That's what's going to happen to the elderly. The people that retired, like myself, are on a fixed income. All of a sudden we get taxed because of the fossil fuel that we use. We can't afford it. So what does the government do when they find out that the elderly can't afford it? They vote for a spending bill. Let's give the elderly the money so that they can pay for the carbon tax. Hey, cool. So the elderly can sit back and relax, collect their money from the government, pay for the carbon tax. Oh, it works fine. Except for the middle class, the guys that are out there working. Their taxes go up because now they got to pay for the elderly to pay for the carbon tax, and then they got to turn around and pay for the carbon tax. It's a snowball. It just keeps getting bigger and bigger. I think it's ridiculous.
Well, and along those same lines, when you look at being from Springfield, you're in the the Connecticut River Valley. Yeah. And if you look at that, and you can see what's happened from Springfield, where business is going and where people go. One of the things that you hear in Montpelier is, hey, we've been successful in reducing smoking because the sales of cigarettes are down in Vermont, as well as cigars and other tobacco products. What I've found, at least in my area, and you let me know what's happening in Springfield, is that there's stores opening up right across the river that sell liquor, cigarettes, cigars, all these sorts of things. And I don't think people are smoking less, they're just buying them in a different location. And what happened was the tax revenues we anticipated went down. So my thought is, with a fossil fuel tax, people are going to maybe go across the river to buy their fuel over there. What do you think? Would you see that happen in Springfield?
There's no doubt in my mind. You hit the nail on the head. Springfield happens to be one of the lucky towns in Vermont because we are next door to New Hampshire. And it doesn't take us very long to go over to New Hampshire. And there's a lot of us that do that. I'm sorry, Vermont, but there's a lot of us that do that. But it's really putting a hurt in. It is a big thing down in Vermont about the taxes. Let's go across this, across the river and benefit from Vermont having the high tax. But it is putting a hurting to the Vermont businesses in Springfield.
Right. And you talked earlier about people on a fixed income.
Yeah.
So if you do a carbon tax, I can take my pickup truck and drive across to New Hampshire.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I could probably throw a tank in the back of my truck and go get my home heating fuel over there. But if I'm an elderly person and I don't have that ability, I can't move my fuel tank.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the people that are least likely to be able to afford it and the most vulnerable people are going to be paying for this.
Correct.
And when you look at people, everything that you purchase came on a truck at some point. All that is going to be rolled into the price, making Vermont still more unaffordable.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that you understand that the carbon tax and the sales tax on services and other taxes like that probably are not in the best interest of the state of Vermont. And I think that we should be looking to New Hampshire and see what we need to do to become more competitive, not less competitive. Now, one of the things that has occurred a couple of years ago, you hear all the time, education spending. All right? So 2 years ago, we up in Montpelier decided we're going to pass Act 46 to consolidate schools and school districts. And it's through a system of rewards for those that consolidate, penalties for those that don't. The people that don't are paying for the rewards of the other people. So it's kind of an inequitable system to start with. And then last year it was tweaked a little bit. Basically it was watered down, but it's still problematic to many towns, whether it's school choice, local governance, ownership of your school buildings, whatever issue you have with it, it still exists because above all else it was one size fits all. So what is your view of Act 46? Do you think it should be repealed? Do you think it needs to be further tweaked? Or do you think, Sue Mentor's right, we should be right where we are?
No, I'm leaning toward the repeal, but I might be wrong in this. From what I understand, the schools should be consolidated so that they can take like 3 schools, consolidate them to one. Instead of having 3 teachers, now you got 1. And instead of having 20 kids in the classroom, you got 50. And if you don't agree with this Act 46, if you got Act 46, then what happens is the government or the state has the right to come down to your town where you have this one-room schoolhouse and say, okay, you can now no longer have this one-room schoolhouse. You got to join up with a neighboring town and send your kids over there, pay the tuition, make money for that town. But then you're sending the kids from that one-room schoolhouse, I'm exaggerating here, where they're getting the value of almost like a one-on-one with their teacher, going to another class where now you're just one of many. I think it's ruining the education of the kids. And also, you're showing that the government has the control whether you have your school or not. I think it should be local. I'm babbling here, but I think it should be local. The town should have control over their own school. If they want the school, keep it. If you don't want the school, vote that you don't want a school and you want to consolidate. I don't want you to be forced to do this. And there's a question I have in my own mind. When I was in school, 50 years ago or whatever, the teachers were complaining when they had 20 kids in their class. They said, we need smaller classes so that we can teach these kids. And they worked like a son of a gun trying to get the smaller class. And now, all of a sudden, the government's trying to tell us that, oh, teachers, you got to have 30 kids in your class now. You should be able to teach them. But you don't have to worry, because you don't have to give them homework. You don't have to be correcting homework every night. No homework. I can't see anything good, with the exception of, I like the school choice, but I can't see anything good with the Act 46.
Okay. Well, there are some people in Act 46 thinks that it's taking away school choice, so there's a lot of debate going on. Yeah, for those of us that voted against Act 46, we saw it kind of as maybe an overreach, but the biggest issue with it is it's the old one-size-fits-all, and that never really works. I mean, what's good for Springfield may work very well in Springfield because it's a big community. Well, it may not work well for me in Vernon, which is a very small community.
It will help on Springfield because we have a big school. We have the tech center there, and we just welcome kids coming in, and I'm sure that they'll look forward to the tuition that the kids have to pay. But as a Vermonter, I can't see it. I can't see the government coming down and saying, you've got to close this school and send your kids here. And if you don't, we're going to punish you. It's not right.
All right. Something that has been in conversation for a couple of years and continues to be a problem is Vermont Health Connect. All right. It was, ever since it was established, it's had a bunch of problems with it. The website's been problematic, signing, getting on and off. It certainly hasn't provided the economic relief we thought, that some thought it would. And it's cost the state somewhere between $175 and $200 million to implement. And it's still not functioning correctly, and it's certainly not working as promised. When you get to the legislature, what do you think, as a member of the legislature, you should do, or the legislature should do, to correct the problems with Vermont Health Connect?
Okay, I'm going to try to be honest here, Mike.
Well, I hope so.
No, but you probably know more about the Vermont Health Connect than I do. I'm sure of that. But I've learned a little bit about it in the last couple of weeks. And the reason I say that is because a couple of weeks ago, I was dead against it. I said, repeal it, get rid of it, and let's go back where we were 8 years ago. But since then, we've got a new election coming up. And the Republican candidate, Phil Scott, has a health plan. And so I said, okay, I'm gonna take a look at it and just see what he says or has for ideas. And I kind of like some of what he said. And there's been other people that said, well, Vermont has it, we're doing it wrong, but we should be able to look around to other states and seeing how they're doing and, see if we can learn something. So in Phil Scott's plan, come to find out, we have spent $200 million in the state of Vermont. New Hampshire, right across the river, spent $16 million. And theirs seems to be working a little bit. And come to find out, New Hampshire has more affordable options than Vermont does. We spent $200 million and we still got problems. Okay, why are we staying with the system? We should be looking probably at other states and finding out, what are they doing that's working? So I'm kind of leaning toward compromise. There's some things I don't like about the whole thing, but I'm willing to compromise with something like Phil Scott's plan and saying, I think this might work. And so I'm leaning toward giving him a chance. But there's another thing that I saw in his plan that I'd like to mention here. And I'm going to quote it. And it says, urging the federal government to amend the Federal Affordable Care Act to allow Vermonters to purchase insurance across state lines. Mm-hmm. I kind of appreciate this because I'm a guy that says eliminate this affordable care. Because originally, I'm thinking that the only reason we got this is because of pre-existing conditions. And we needed, those people needed insurance. This is a way they could get insurance, so let's go to the Affordable Care Act. And so they went there, they supposedly got their insurance. But I've learned through my family members, it's not that easy. I think if they open it up to more competition, the free market, free enterprise, insurance, open it up to state lines. I really liked that. That's why I'm really leaning toward his plan. So that's my feelings on it. You got to forgive me. I don't have to worry about insurance. One of the things I told you earlier, I'm retired military. The military does take care of its vets, and so forgive me for not knowing that much about the Vermont Care. But my family is under the Vermont Care.
Well, it's different too. For those of us in the legislature, you live it every day, so you kind of know it. Mm-hmm. But I think folks like yourself that are looking from the outside looking in, sometimes you have a better view than we do because you see the broader picture. Mm-hmm. We kind of focus on little things. So don't feel bad about your vision because it's a broader vision maybe, and it's less focused. And to hear that you're willing to compromise, at least you recognize one good thing about if you want to get things accomplished. You don't get everything you want.
Correct.
You got to get some of you want, but so that's not a bad thing. Now, another issue that we've heard a little bit about, I'm not sure how big an issue it is up in Springfield area, but certainly in Windham County it's big, is wind turbines. Mm-hmm. Industrial wind. Bill last year was unanimously passed the House. Everybody in the House voted for it to give more local control over the siting of wind projects. It got rewarded when the governor threatened to veto the bill. And as it was rewarded and the deal was made, all that was done, he still vetoed the bill. The problem with that was the bill was vetoed. We had to go back into session, cost tens of thousands of dollars to Vermonters for us to be in session to do something about the veto. In general, what are your thoughts on siting of energy projects? Again, is that a local control issue? What do you see, or do you see as wind turbines being problematic or not? Yeah. I'd like to know what Dennis Pine feels about our renewable energy plan for Vermont.
Okay, renewable energy, I think, or no, what I believe is that a homeowner, if he wants a solar panel, have a solar panel. If he wants a windmill, he can have a windmill. But when it comes to state land, private, or other kind of private land, I don't think the government has the right to go in there and tear that land apart and put in windmills and solar panels. And one of the reasons I say that is kind of cool. Back in 1970, the state of Vermont passed the Act 250. And the Act 250 was passed to prevent the ski areas from demolishing more mountains for the ski areas. They wanted to kind of stop it, have the locals take control of their land. And if a ski area wanted to come in, now I'm a skier. The ski area comes in, wants to tear this mountain apart, make ski trails, then we have the right to say no, because we want that mountain to be a view. And Vermont, I think, depends a lot on that view for the revenue. I think we get an unbelievable amount of money from tourists coming in here to see the view that Vermont has.
Right, so you believe in renewable energy,
Correct.
correct scale,
Correct.
and the 500-foot towers, you got kind of an issue with those, do you?
If they want to do it on their own land, I mean, on private property, go for it. Where I have the problem is on the state land. I have a cabin that's on a pond, and across the pond I have a mountain, and I love it. I just sit there and just mesmerized by it. It's really pretty. And I just can't picture the government coming in and saying, okay, we're going to tear this mountain apart, and we're going to put windmills on it, we're going to put solar panels on it, and you will not see a green leaf, you won't see a red leaf, you won't see a yellow leaf. Okay, that irritates me. When I first came to Vermont, my wife took me for a tour through the hills of Vermont so we could see the beauty of the countryside. And she looks at me, she says, do you notice anything? I go, what? It looks no different than New Hampshire. I says, I can see, it's just as pretty as New Hampshire. And she says, yeah, but there's something different. And I go, what? And she says, you don't see billboards. And I go, wow. So when I go back to New Hampshire and I go through the mountains in New Hampshire, seeing all the beauty, and I have to move because the billboard's in the way. I go, wow, just a simple billboard. And so when I come to Vermont, you really want to hold on to that. I'm not going to go out there and say, no more windmills, no more solar panels. There's a place for them. But
All right, this is going to surprise you, but we're just about out of time. Didn't that go fast? Told you it was going to go fast. What I'd like you to do, November 8th is just around the corner. You're hoping that people will come and vote for Dennis Pine on November 8th. You want their vote and stuff like that. In a minute or so, or 30 seconds or so, what would you bring to the table that you feel is why people should vote for Dennis Pine on November 8th?
Okay, I hope this takes me less than a minute, but it won't. Thank you for having me first, Mike. Thank you. But I do want to say something. The Springfields of Vermont should be rejoicing in the streets right now, because now, this year, election time, they got a choice. This is the first time in a number of years that they actually had some Republicans on the ballot. But you got a choice, and I think the choice is easy. If you want someone that really knows how to spend your hard-earned money and then taxes you for spending that money, then vote Democrat. If you want the legislature to operate like a responsible institution, vote Republican. If you want your state of Vermont to become a nanny state by taking away some of your rights that you have had in the past, vote Democrat. If you want to protect your independence and some of your freedoms from the government that is getting too big, then vote Republican. And if you like what is happening in our educational system, then vote Democrat. If you want our kids to learn our true American history, basic math skills, civic responsibilities, and the sciences so that they can compete with the rest of the world, vote Republican. Ladies and gentlemen of the viewing audience, and especially you in Springfield, my name is Dennis Pine, and I am a Republican.